The ZGB Executioner Sword, full tank construction, micarta scales, 1075 high carbon steel blade, convex grind, big belly and a sharp point. It's specifically designed by Charles Foltz and Chuck Murray for zombie survival. It can chop through almost anything. It can take a hell of a beating. It cleaves through the undead with ease. Now in stock and ready to ship the next day at zombiegoboom.com or cultivatina.com. Check out the links in the description. Also, check out this sword's companion, the Mini X Dagger, now for pre-order, only at zombiegoboom.com.
Zombies, the bloodthirsty undead. When they arrive, will you survive? Zombie go boom. Kick undead ass.
Hey, what's up, survivors? Welcome to another mind-blowing episode from Zombie Go Boom. I'm Chuck Murray.
I'm Charles Foltz.
Hey folks, Matt Easton here.
Greetings, I'm Shad.
Hey, Thrand here.
And it is a mind-blowing one, I promise, because it's finally here. Longsword
Versus Katana.
Katana versus Longsword.
We've got a really interesting comparison here between the longsword and the katana.
Asked by Chuck Murray from Zombie Go Boom to compare the katana to the longsword.
A lot's been said about longsword versus katana.
You see this again and again. You see videos trying to prove and settle the debate once and for all, and then you see videos debunking those videos trying to settle the debate once and for all.
Well, there's no question about it. He just lost his arm, his heart, some of his intestines.
What? Now you've got intestines on your left shoulder.
One of the first things people will raise in this discussion, katana versus longsword, is how the swords are made.
In Japan, they have to go through a very, very lengthy manufacturing process.
And they'll point towards the katana using an ingenious method of metal folding and differential hardening that makes it far superior to any other type of sword.
However, European steel was no worse, and in some ways we could say that Europe was more blessed with better iron deposits with less impurities. And in actual fact, this means that blade manufacture in Europe could actually lead to springy sorts of steel blades that could be through tempered.
Spring steel. Spring steel is awesome. Okay.
So one of the first things to note about the katana is that generally speaking they're very hard at the edge. Usually antiques, originals are around 60 Rockwell at the edge. European swords vary more like 45 to 50 Rockwell historically at the edge. So yes, the katana does have a harder edge, which theoretically means it can have a sharper edge, or at least retain a sharper edge. However, the European sword does have an advantage over the traditionally made katana. Traditionally made katanas, the reason they have that wavy line along the edge, the hamon, is because the edge is hardened only, or the edge is hardened to a greater degree by the application of clay on the blade when it's quenched. And that does mean that while the edge is very, very sharp, the back of the blade is actually quite soft. European blades are through hardened and through tempered.
A katana is not made in a superior way to other swords. It's made in an ingenious way for the materials that existed in the time, but that does not render a sword or create a sword that is inherently superior in terms of its quality of steel and its internal structure than other means of manufacture, including those means that did exist in Europe. As soon as a sword is made to a high enough level of quality that it will function adequately for its use, there is not much difference in how swords are made in that regard. If they're good enough, you won't find too much difference until the sword gets put under a huge amount of stress. That is where how the sword is made becomes a far more significant topic.
A European blade is like a spring. If you bend it, it will come back to straight again. Japanese blades, if you bend them, stay bent.
But if you use the sword right, okay, they will rarely be put under such huge amounts of stress.
So which sword is better? Well, obviously, this is a question that what context are we asking it in? Which is better for fighting in armor? Which is better for actually, a duel? Which is better for fighting in battle? Which is better for fighting in Japan? Which is better for fighting in Europe in the time periods that they were used?
One of the things that nearly all these comparisons don't acknowledge is one of the most significant things to consider: what type of katana and what type of longsword.
And we have 4 instruments of death to show you, but the first 2 are these. They're both made by Hanwei. They're both about $300 and they are 5160 spring steel. These are our mid-grade levels. And our high-end swords are these 2. This one is from Lockwood Swords. It's 5160 spring steel as well.
And this one is made by Iron Tiger Forge. It's 7 laminated layers of T10, T8, and 5160.
The longsword can be varied in its design to a far greater degree than the katana can, by combining every possible longsword design that you could make based on its variations, and every type of katana that you could make based on its main variations. There's always going to be more types of longsword variations than there are katana, therefore you can always find a longsword that is capable of at least matching, if not exceeding, a quality that the katana possesses.
So due to the stylized techniques for armor and being able to half sword with it, hit with the pommel, hit with the quillions, use it like a club pretty much if you had to, use it like a blade against people who were wearing lighter armor, being able to thrust with it, using it in civilian situations, and the various designs you can get between these 2 extremes. I have to say that the longsword is superior in every way to the katana when it comes to advantages that you can gain from it. But not every single longsword would have the same advantages because they're different variations, and it's a category. It's a modern category that wasn't used historically. As for the katana, it's pretty much been that way around the 14th century up. The katana has been the katana.
For someone who's maybe not trained to use a longsword so well, they will find this more of a challenging sword to cut with than the katana. First of all, it's got that wobble, so if it's not so stiff as the katana, which means if you get the edge alignment slightly off, the blade's going to flex, and that's going to go against your cutting form.
The hilt is extremely long on the katana. It has no counterbalance and it's blade heavy. So what ends up happening is you get a blade you can draw quickly. It's a curved blade and it's a single bevel. If you look at the blade, it's a beautiful design. It's a back sword. That allows it to cut very effectively, and that's what it is. It's a cutter. This sword is designed to cut.
What we can say in a general sense is that the standard katana is more focused and emphasized towards cutting than the standard longsword, because it's far harder to try and define what the standard longsword is.
This should be compared to something like an arming sword, a knightly sword, or a Viking sword. I don't think it should be compared to a sword like this. Because let's look at this. This falls in the category of a longsword. This is a claymore. This blade, the only thing that keeps it from being in the pure category of a longsword is its weight. This one weighs about 6.1 pounds. This katana here weighs a little under 3 pounds. So if you compare them, the hilt's almost the same length if you really compare it properly, but it has way more hand protection. The longsword has a cruciform guard at the least. Sometimes it has side rings, sometimes it has swept hilts, sometimes it even has a basket hilt late century. So you look at these swords, then yes, it's not a fair comparison.
Actually, someone who doesn't really know what they're necessarily doing with a sword and who isn't trained in swordsmanship will probably find the katana easier to cut with. And that's for a number of reasons. Firstly, the blade is short, but it is thick. Okay, so it's a similar weight to the longsword. This longsword is a little bit heavier than this katana. However, of course it's a bigger weapon, so we'd expect that. But with the katana, whilst it's shorter, it is actually quite a thick blade. That means it's stiff. A stiff blade is a very forgiving blade. It means that if we get our edge alignment at all messed up, anything other than perfect, the stiffer blade actually can drag through the target and still cut fairly well. Going to the longsword, however, longswords are, if I just tap this blade, you can see they are flexible, because in order to get that extra length, the blade has distal taper. That means it gets thinner and thinner and thinner towards the tip, generally speaking. Or it tapers in that portion of the blade, so in silhouette essentially. It starts off broad and tapers down here. That is so that the weight distribution can still be manageable as a quick weapon, as a fighting weapon, but you can get as much blade length as possible, primarily to use the point for thrusting, but to increase your cutting range as well. Additionally, the region of the blade that can cut effectively, I would argue, is shorter on a longsword than it is on a katana. If someone hits with the tip of the blade, they're going to cut really, really badly. They really need to be cutting down here.
If you were to compare a katana in its cutting capacity against a longsword that wasn't built to be a beastie cutter, well then clearly the longsword is gonna fall short in that regard, wouldn't it?
With the katana, there are two factors that are really important here. One is that the centre of percussion is essentially all the way to the tip, and even the tip can cut well, and the thickness and stiffness of the blade mean that it's more forgiving if the edge alignment isn't perfect. So, I think that for most people, most of the time, a katana is going to be more easy to cut more effectively. In a real fight, you've got to remember that the longsword has a very real reach advantage with the point and to a degree with the edge, but it has a better handguard on it. It has a flexible blade that won't get bent if you mess up a cut or someone stands on it or something like this. So the longsword has other advantages to it. It is not that the katana is per se a better sword.
Now, not all katanas are created equal, and we know that because we've tested pretty much every variation, from a mall katana to a traditionally made laminated differentially heat-treated katana to a through-tempered modern high-carbon steel heavy cutting katana. That said, this majestic weapon is widely considered to be the most badass type of sword, but due to the inconsistencies in sword making skill and materials used, the jury is very much still out on that one.
While the reduced length of the blade means a reduced speed at the tip, it does mean that because the weapon's overall a little bit lighter, a little bit shorter, it does mean that lots of people will find it easier to accelerate to a quick speed more quickly. We should remember though that the longsword has equal leverage, a longer blade, so faster tip speed, and it's only a little bit heavier really than the katana, so it's still a quick and nimble sword that can move quickly through the target.
Who do you think is gonna win? Pull right there. Are you ready to get started?
I'm always ready.
Of course he is. Let's do it.
Alright, for the majority of these tests, we're going to be using the mid-range swords. The mid-range longsword, the mid-range katana, they're both made by Hanwei, they're both made of the same steel, and they're both around the same price, because we want this test to be as fair as possible. We're also going to be doing the same strikes to keep the test fair. The first strike is going to be a 45-degree angle strike to the side of the head, and I'm going to go first. Alright, I put a lot of power into that strike. As you can see, my edge alignment was a little wonky in the slow-mo, but even still, the head is cut completely, almost nearly in half. Look at that. Jeez. Yeah, it basically is cracked all the way around. Like, I cut halfway through it and then the crack just did the rest. I don't know if you can see up in there, but there's a huge crack in front of the blade there. So I'd say that's a kill, and that's a lot of damage, and I highly doubt that longsword's gonna get anywhere close to that.
Alright, so it looks like the cut actually kind of started as a 45, and then my edge just went in the opposite direction. That caused the sword to whip around. So my strike was poor, to be honest with you. I think I tried to put too much power into it, and I lost edge alignment and accuracy, as you can see. But it's still a kill. It cut the occipital bone completely off. So as far as kills are concerned, this did pretty much about as much damage as the katana.
Alright, next up is the decapitation. Well, that was just about the easiest decapitation I've ever done. It was pretty much like cutting through butter. I don't know if Chuck Murray with the longsword is going to be able to keep up.
Game on! Game on. So definitely not as clean of a decapitation, but I did hit a little low and my angle wasn't perfect, so it's a little bit of user error. I'm not having a very good day today. But either way, it killed it. Head came off, same amount of damage as the katana.
Alright, now it's time for a special attack. I'm going to try to decap this zombie by drawing the sword and striking at the same time. I've never actually done this before, so let's see how it works.
Wow! Look at that.
You can pretty much bet that he's dead.
Alright, for this test I'm going to be using the high-end sword, and the reason why is because out of the box it actually wasn't super sharp, which is good for me in this instance because I can try to test out half swording, and I can also test out a murder how to see what that would do to this head. Okay. Yes. We got in the skull. It's definitely stuck. That's a problem. But we got in about 1.5 inches. So a little bit more, and it actually would have gone all the way in because that was almost the entire thickness of the blade. Possible kill, I guess. Ready? In and out. Crap. Yep. Oh my god, that's crazy. Yeah, so crossguard just went in.
Wow.
Hit and came back out, and I actually didn't use a lot of power on that one, so that's devastating.
I did.
Alright, so a few things. If you were to actually test out historical swords, the results would be a little bit different because katanas are laminated steel and the medieval longsword is a carbon steel that's all just one piece of steel. So historically, I don't know if the results would have been like they are here, but we did do a fair test where we took swords made by the same company that had the same steel and battled them out, and they did a similar amount of damage regardless of what test we actually did. I feel the longsword should win because it has more versatility. You can half sword and you can you have a longer point, so you're closer to the target, and you have the crossguard and the pommel in order to do murder strokes, which is a bludgeoning attack.
I think actually the katanas are better because although it does take some amount of skill to use, I think it actually takes more skill to use those swords because you have to be a lot more precise with your angles, a lot more precise with your strikes. These, you can strike at almost, whatever angle you hit the target at, it's going to go through as long as your edge alignment is on. With those swords, if your edge alignment is on, you're going to cut through it, but as you were seeing, the blade's also going to whip around like that, and that did not happen with the katana.
Now it's time for you guys to battle it out in the comment section below. I'll also put a poll right there. What do you think won? Longsword, Katana. Special thanks to Matt Easton from Scola Gladiatoria and Thrand from Thrand. Also, definitely special thanks to Cult of Athena for providing these swords for us to test, and the companies that these swords are made by. All of the links to every single thing I just mentioned below in the description, so check that out. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And with another mind-blowing episode from Zombie Go Boom, I'm Chuck Murray.
And I'm Charles Foltz.
And we will see you next time.